Who's that coming down the track? Who's that coming down the track? It's a mean machine in red and black. It's a mean machine in red and black. Ain't nothing finer in the land. Ain't nothing finer in the land. Them drunk obnoxious Georgia fans. Them drunk obnoxious Georgia fans. Go, go! Go, go!
What's up, y'all? This is John and Caleb back for another episode of the Nothing Finer podcast. Tonight, we are talking about the best games from Week 11, or going into Week 11, I should say. But before we get into really anything else, we've got to remind you guys about the watch party we are doing this Saturday at Barrel House South in Savannah. It's going to be a great time. We're giving away my personal tickets to the UMass game. And if you buy something from a million store, if you buy something from the table we're gonna have set up, that will get you an extra entry in for those tickets. So we're pretty excited about that. But how you been? What are you drinking?
I'm pretty no man, I can't English apparently, but I have
Words
been
are hard.
indeed. I have been pretty good. William McKinley was just elected president, so that's pretty nice. I might be 100 years or so off on that. Well, it is what it is. But yeah, I've been good. I'm currently drinking some sweet tea that is sweetened with, I can't remember what the stuff is called. Some kind of agave nectar sounds right. My
Okay.
wife has gotten super crunchy, so we're trying to get rid of the processed sugars, and
Felt.
it it uh it tastes kind of like, I guess, a McDonald's sweet tea, but probably a ton healthier than a McDonald's sweet tea.
I
So
gotcha.
I ain't mad at it. What about you? How you doing?
Doing good, man. We did 9 hours at Universal today.
Mm,
Um, and I got home, I got back to the condo, ate some Chick-fil-A, and I have a unsweet tea and lemonade, Arnold
mm,
Palmer. Um,
classic.
yeah, I kind of hate myself for drinking it, but when I quit drinking sugar, just a regular Arnold Palmer tastes like diabetes, and I can't do it anymore.
That's fair. That's a problem I've developed with it too. But I do. Or what does Chick-fil-A call them? Like Sun Dream or something weird like that?
It's Sunjoy.
Sunjoy. That's right.
Yeah.
It's an Arnold Palmer, y'all. Grow up.
Well, so
But
I think they got a cease and desist from when they used to call it the Arnold
uh
Palmer. Which, are you going to take God to court? Like, come on now. What are you doing here?
right, no kidding. But I will say I did I like Chick-fil-A's, but I did when I went to the National this year for the Masters, for just a practice round because I'm not rich. Um I did make sure I got an Arnold Palmer from there,
Yeah,
and it was glorious.
yeah.
But also probably way sweeter than anything else I've had to drink this entire year. So we'll take that for what it's worth.
Every year I put myself in the Masters lottery with no intent to actually go. Um, like even if I win, what I've always said is there's so many people in the whiskey world that just would sell their soul and every nice bottle of whiskey they have for those tickets. And
Hmm.
every year people trade away like $2,000 bottles of whiskey for a practice round Masters ticket. So I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna put myself in every year, and if I get it, I'm gonna get some nice ass whiskey for it.
Yeah, go for it.
Like
That's a
I don't care about golf.
Yeah. I mean, I don't either. Most of the honestly, it's funny. You can tell. Sorry to get off on a tangent about a golf tournament that happened 7 months ago, but you can tell who the out of town people are versus who is in town, because the folks who are coming from out of town are usually at the holes watching the golf happen, and the folks who are in town are kind of in the walkways and by the concession stands. It's just a big social event here at Augusta. So, but most of the people who get tickets from Augusta don't even care about the tournament. They just want to say they went to the Masters, get their little picture at the uh, clubhouse or whatever it's called, and talk to some people and be done with it. So which is unfortunate that there are people who care about golf who'd probably like those tickets a little more. But that's just how it goes. I am probably the only local person who ever actually sat down and watched people play golf when I went.
Yeah, golf to me is, unless you're into it, like really into it, it's more boring than baseball on TV.
Yeah, I have to agree with that. It's fun to do live, and I like going to practice rounds in particular. I've been to a few, like I went to TPC one year practice rounds, just because like you get a little more interaction with the golfers there. They're just laid back, having a good time. You can actually go back and forth a little bit. But yeah, I have not watched a golf tournament on TV in my entire life unless my dad just happened to have it on, and that is going to continue.
The only thing that I've ever intentionally watched on TV is the match when it was COVID,
Mm,
and it was like the first live sporting event in 4 months. And I was like, yeah, okay. They're mic'd up. They're gonna be talking shit. I'll watch that, you know.
yeah,
And then I watched about 3 holes, and I was like, man, it's still golf. What am I doing?
yeah. I had that same experience when Live started. I was like, well, it'll be a little different. It's a little more relaxed, a couple of different rules could be interesting. No, no. It
Yeah.
was the equivalent of baseball making the bases a little bigger. Just didn't do anything for me.
Um. Yeah. I mean, we're gonna get into a game right here. It's not really gonna do anything for anybody, and it's sad because
Yeah.
before the injuries to Florida, we thought that maybe this could be interesting. We're talking about Florida at Texas here. Texas 21.5 point favorite, over under 47.5. And we've talked about it a few times on the show over the last few weeks.
I see a
Before
very funny typo on one of your bullet points. Sorry, continue.
hopefully I'll realize it when I get to it. Yeah, just a little inside the part baseball. I typed these notes while I was at like in line for rides at Universal today, so there's probably a lot of messed up shit in here. Just
I'll
gonna
only
be
call it out
completely
if it's
honest.
funny, I promise.
All right. So we were hopeful on this game for the injuries, and I checked the availability report this morning for Florida. Not an injury report, availability report. Um, and that just made me sad for Florida
Same.
because a healthy Florida team with DJ Lagway and all the other weapons, I think truly covers this 21.5, makes it extremely interesting with Texas. Florida has 10 guys listed as out, including guys who were starters at defensive back, wide receiver, and offensive line.
Ouch.
Lagway, DJ Lagway, Montrell Johnson. Oh, Eli
You
Badger.
found it.
Found it.
Elijah Badger, not Elizabeth Badger.
Yep. Um, and Dijon Johnson, which that is his real first name. Shout out you, Dijon.
Love it. Just
They're
had some
all
Dijon
listed.
mustard today.
They're all listed as questionable. Um, Not probable, but straight up questionable. And, none of that really gives me any sort of confidence that Florida can beat Texas. It doesn't really give me confidence that Florida can cover
Yeah. It's a
against.
big spread, but yeah.
Yeah, without Lagway being 100%, I don't know if Florida can cover the spread just because of the explosiveness he gives that offense. And because of that, I am taking Texas with this. But if DJ Lagway comes out and looks 70%, I would say, and that with any sort of hamstring injury, that is a very tall task. But if he's 70%, I feel like the Warner kid gave Billy enough confidence that DJ will be able to run the ball this weekend. And then I think covering that 21.5 is not out of the question.
Yeah, yeah. I agree. I think with Lagway, again, it's a lot closer of a game. I posted my score prediction on my Instagram this morning, not having read the report yet and thinking Lagway would probably be probable and come out with revenge on his mind. But with questionable, I don't really want to say that. So I like Texas pretty big in this one. I want to feel sorry for Florida, but I can't because they're Florida. I do feel bad for Lagway, but I do not feel bad for Florida at all.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. I don't necessarily feel bad for the fans because they've
Oh yeah,
been the worst for the
for
most
sure.
part, with few exceptions. But
Yeah,
the players that committed to the program trying to be part of a rebuild, I can't be mad at somebody for that, right?
yeah, for sure. As long as they're not going out there doing something stupid to our players, I don't care.
Right. And
I
as
want them
long
to
as it's not
succeed, just
Brenton
not at Florida.
Cox. Yeah.
Yeah,
As long as it's
exactly.
not Brenton Cox being an idiot,
Yeah,
um, then, I do feel bad for the players because when this team was healthy for a few weeks, they looked dangerous.
yeah,
And they were only healthy about 3 weeks this season. And we're in week 11.
yeah, which is a shame for those guys in particular. But I also think Texas after the bye week is going to be looking to score a lot of points, considering they haven't done that in their last two outings.
Yep.
And I just don't think Florida's going to be able to keep up. But apparently that doesn't really matter because Sunbelt Billy is safe for the next year.
Yeah. I, man, you know, Bobby talked to Mike and I about it last week.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a terrible situation that they've put themselves in. And I can't say I feel bad for the program, but man, like Mike put it in here, nothing would make him happier than Georgia winning a title while Florida gets blown out in their last few SEC um, games this season.
He also added that he's feeling kind of horny, so horns up for 3 hours on Saturday.
Okay, I
Great,
was
great
trying to
note.
figure out what that meant before I said it out loud.
Yeah, he's picking Texas, I think is what it's supposed to mean.
Oh, okay, okay. Um, but yeah, man, Florida put themselves in a real shitty situation, and should they get blown out in the last few games, should they lose by more than 2 possessions to this Florida State team,
Yeah, how can
man,
you renege on it at this point is the question. I don't think you can.
I don't think so either. But more
Yeah,
importantly, they're gonna have a mass exodus of like LSU proportions from a couple
yeah,
years ago when they were playing with like 30 scholarship players in a bowl game.
yeah. Scott Strickland might get fired just so Billy Napier gets fired, if that happens.
Yeah. Well, they don't have a president to fire anybody. It's a
That's
wild
true.
shit.
That's another thing. The inmates running the asylum, if you will.
Yeah. And speaking of asylum, South Carolina at Vandy is one of the probably going to be
Craziest
one of the more
games.
fun games.
Yeah.
Like in what world did we think 2024 South Carolina at Vandy is going to be an electric home atmosphere and a good game?
I'm so looking forward to it. So many fun things about this game. What time is this game? I need to look it up.
I think
It's
it is
4:15. No, it's at the same time. Oh,
just
I will
record it.
be okay. I will be doing that. No spoilers.
So we got South Carolina 3.5 point favorites on the road, over under 45.5. And this is a great strength on strength matchup. And I know that Vandy technically has the 107th ranked total offense. I understand that. There's three things about this Vandy team that make me throw that stat completely aside when talking about them. They played much better against the better competition than they have against mid competition. They had 418 yards against Alabama, 227 yards against Auburn. They've played significantly better at home this season. Offensively, they're gaining 50 more yards per game at home than in away games. And number three, and probably most important, Diego fucking Pavia is still their quarterback.
That's fair. That's really all you need.
The most fun story in all of college football this
Hmm.
year. Like you have Ashton Genty standing like a video game character that hasn't been told to move in the backfield. And scoring more points as an individual than the entire Florida State Seminoles football team.
which is hilarious.
And Diego Pavia is still the best story in college football.
Yeah. Ginty's probably the best player. Pavia is definitely the best story.
Yes. Vandy is 27th in sacks allowed and has played some defenses this year that are great at getting after the quarterback. An average opponent sack ranking of 49.8. And to kind of clarify that number a little bit, every one of their FBS opponents has been in the top 80. They just also played a team that was ranked 123rd in sacks.
Mm.
So they've played really good competition and one really bad competition, and that drastically skewed the stat there. The biggest concern for me on the Vandy side of this one is while Vandy has a very difficult running game to stop. We've talked about it a lot. They run essentially a quad option. South Carolina is 19th in stopping the run. Shockingly, Vandy is 26th in stopping the run while playing much better offenses. Texas with the 16th ranked offense, Bama with the 37th, and Auburn at 46th. That's kind of surprising.
Well, they don't have a quarterback, so the fact that the run offense is gaining yards doesn't really surprise me.
Fair. The numbers are making me lean into the Vandy side of this more, especially with how much of a roller coaster the South Carolina offense has been this season. And I think you've just got to go with a more consistent team, really. South Carolina either is blowing the doors off of a ranked team that they shouldn't be beating or getting their teeth kicked in. And I think this is probably going to lean more towards Vandy by 10 or so than South Carolina winning.
This has probably been the hardest game for me to pick all season in terms of figuring out who's going to win. There's been some games where I haven't really watched either team, but in terms of team, like games between teams that I really know and have dove into, this has been the hardest. And that's what makes this game just so fun.
Yes.
Along with everything else, they're both great stories. And I would love to join you in picking Vanderbilt in this one. I really would, because Diego Pavia has the entirety of my heart and soul. If he wants it, call me back. But their offense recently, the last few games, has taken a bit of a step back. They haven't scored 30 points since the Alabama game, and one of those games was against Ball State. South Carolina will be the best pass rush they have faced in that stretch. And so just for that reason alone, I think that's going to be enough for South Carolina to get the win here, as long as the defense plays disciplined, which is a question mark.
Yeah, for South Carolina's defense, I don't really have any questions. I think they're the best defense in the SEC, top to bottom. I call me a traitor if you want to, Georgia fans. I look at the tape, look at the numbers.
You're correct, so I won't.
My problem is South Carolina's offense is either one of the best in the country, or you're questioning if they have a quarterback on the roster.
Right.
That's in the consistency that you're going to get with even in that game against Ball State where they didn't score a lot, it's because they were going for like 4th and 5s in the red zone instead of going for points, because they had 388 total yards in that game.
Yeah.
So I'm going to take consistency in a team that is bowl eligible in Vandy.
Yep.
Just, I
Love
really
it.
wish
Oh,
I could have gotten in on the season win total over when I tried to.
that would have been magical. For what it's worth, Mike does agree with you. He's taken Vandy to win outright. One of his big things is that Pavia beat Alabama when South Carolina could not, and he had Vanderbilt in a position to beat Texas, which is fair enough.
Yeah, and I think one of the huge factors in this game is it is at Vanderbilt.
Crazy to say that Vanderbilt's got a huge home field advantage, Nick Saban.
And to be fair to Nick Saban, they have not until Pavia showed up.
Yeah. And it's not even like the crowd for Vanderbilt is a huge factor in these games. They're just playing better at home.
Yeah. All right. Talking about another team that only plays well at home for the most part, Bama at LSU. Don't ask LSU if they're going to play a game in Vegas or New Orleans or Tallahassee
Or week 0 of the season, or week
or
1 rather.
yeah, at South Carolina. They can't seem to do well in that game. But Bama is a 3-point favorite going into this one at night in Death Valley. Over under 58.5. And I would like you to guess where the Alabama Crimson Tide is ranked in total defense.
Okay, we're talking so total defense, not scoring defense, total defense.
Right, yards allowed.
I'm gonna guess middle of the pack, like 48.
So you were close. 46.
40. Okay, wow. Okay, I'm better at this than I thought.
Would you like to know just a few random teams that are ahead of Alabama in total defense?
Nothing would make me happier.
The Sam Houston Bearcats. The Yukon Huskies.
Hey, they're bowl eligible.
The University of Hawaii Rainbow Warriors. And Miami of Ohio.
Oh, okay, so not the good Miami.
Miami of Ohio.
That's the happiest news I've ever heard in my life.
LSU, on the other hand, is right around where you would expect them to be at 58.
Yeah.
The larger difference comes on the offensive side of the ball. LSU is 21st in total offense, 448 yards per game. Bama's 37th with 431.8 yards per game. And the shocking number when it comes to the offense, LSU is 111th in rushing offense and 21st in
111th.
total. Yeah.
I got to be honest with you. If you put me in a running race with 200 random people and I'm the least athletic person in the world, I don't think I would finish 111. Sorry,
Right,
to be more accurate, 134 random people.
I would trip enough people to not be 111th. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But this is another strength on strength matchup with Bama being 35th in passing yards allowed and LSU being 6th in passing offense. Alabama's 37th in running the ball and 42nd in passing the ball, making them a more balanced team, even with LSU being 8th in total sacks and 6th in sacks per game. I think Bama's balance takes over and wins them a tight game. I think this comes down to LSU driving the ball late and turning the ball over to give Bama the opportunity to knee it out.
That's fair. Again, this is another one I could kind of see going either way. Georgia could be in the tiebreaker guy. Georgia could really use Alabama winning this game. It would completely clear out LSU's tiebreaker advantage, which would be nice. But Brian Kelly has yet to lose a night game at Death Valley. I did pick LSU to win this game at the beginning of the season. But Jalen Milroe is going to be Jalen Milroe in this game. A big part of why LSU lost to Texas A&M is that Marcel Reed ran all over them. A big part of why LSU almost lost to South Carolina is that Lenora Sellers ran all over them.
In the first half, and it took LSU the entire second half to come back.
Yeah. Jalen Milroe is better than both of those quarterbacks, especially at running the football. And Alabama is better up front than either of those teams as well. I do think it's close because it's Death Valley at night and they've got such a big advantage, but I just don't see them overcoming Milroe at this point.
Mike has some interesting notes here. He said he's taking LSU outright. This is where the wheels really fall off for Bama, and you hear Bama fans seriously start to question the DeBoer hire.
Please let that be true. I would love that.
Third loss.
Yeah.
By the second week in November.
Just inject it in my veins if that happens.
He does say that Garrett Nussmeier bussing us all over the Alabama secondary and doesn't offer him a towel, doesn't try to help him clean up. Just, rude as hell, if you will.
Yeah. Honestly, at least give him a shoulder tap or something.
Good game, champ. All right, we're gonna get into this
Speaking of hopefully champs,
Georgia at Ole Miss here. We got Georgia 2.5 point favorite on the road, over under 54.5. And I'm just gonna be honest with y'all. The numbers in this game are all gonna point at Ole Miss. Georgia's been
we've seen that
inconsistent.
before.
Yeah, Georgia's been inconsistent. They've been leaky in the secondary. They've run the ball with an alarmingly low success rate, 97th in the country with 132.2 yards per game. But what has this team done well when playing good opponents? They've risen to the
Yeah.
challenge. Clemson this season averaging 485.4 yards per game. Georgia gave up 188. Texas averaging 453.1 yards per game. The Dawgs gave up 259.
After turning the ball over 3 times, by the way.
Yeah, correct. Last year, this Ole Miss team was elite on the offensive side of the ball. I think it's arguably better than this year's team.
Yeah.
The Dawgs held them 17 points. These boys, and especially this defense, have stood up to the better competition in almost every instance. And I say almost because you know what I'm talking about. We don't need to talk about it.
It's the same one as always. We don't need to worry about it.
Big game lane is a thing. Losing to LSU and Kentucky this year, losing to Bama and Georgia last year. In the 2 games last year, they scored a combined 27 points against Alabama and Georgia.
Yep.
I think this is the game where Carstella gets his groove back. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you're probably too young to listen to this damn show. And this is the game that starts the run. This is where water finds its level. It all gets figured out. And the defense plays close to the level they did against Texas.
Man, I sure hope so. I really hope so, because this, in a lot of ways, it could be a playoff eliminator game. If the decision comes down, you got a 10-2 Georgia, 10-2 Ole Miss, maybe throw a 10-2 Alabama in the mix. 2 of those teams beat Georgia head to head. So hard to make the argument that Georgia should get in over either one of them in that case. So this is a must-win game. And then Kirby Smart himself has acknowledged in his press conferences this week, you cannot let scheme decide this game. Not because Lane is better at scheme than Kirby Smart, but things can get weird with Lane Kiffin.
Sure.
This is a classic, I'll say the cliche, win the game in the trenches kind of game. We got to come out physical. We got to come out ready to take some fools out. These offensive linemen for Ole Miss are big, but they don't move very well. So if we can do that, come out physical, don't turn the ball over, I think we see something similar to, honestly, what we saw with Clemson. I think that is on the table. I would like to take a moment to sort of reevaluate my thoughts on Carstella, as you put it, and his interception problem. Carson Beck, because I'm kind of wanted to clip this, so maybe I will say that sentence again for the clip. I do think we see something. I'm going to take a minute. And I want to reevaluate my thoughts on Carson Beck and his interceptions. There we go. I'm not going to make excuses for him, so relax if that's what you're thinking. But looking at the tape of his interceptions again, a vast majority of them were definitely his fault. I'm not going to change my tune on that. But he hasn't made the same mistake twice in a single case. There were mistakes that he made, for example, when he read the Texas defense. He didn't read a safety when it was going in one direction. He should have read the safety, just didn't even look at him, and he threw an interception. Basically ran the same offensive play against Florida. Florida had basically the same defensive look on the field. This time he looked where the safety was going, made a different read, and threw it somewhere else. So he's learning, and then you see that with everything else that he's made. Sometimes it's been a bad throw, sometimes it's been a bad read, but you can see, obviously not with the Florida game because he hasn't played another game after that yet, but you can see where these corrections are being made. And so he is learning. And the comfort that you get as a Georgia fan from that is eventually he will run out of mistakes to make.
Knock on wood.
Yeah. The question is that going to happen before the 2 biggest games of the season? But I think if he causes 2 or fewer turnovers, I think Georgia wins this game. If it's one or fewer turnovers, I think Georgia wins this game by double digits. If it's 3 again, oh boy. But hopefully it will not come to that.
All right, so I do want to bring up the Ole Miss availability report because I think that's a huge factor going in this game. I meant to put it in my notes and just kind of ran out of time. So going into this game, Henry Parrish out.
Ooh,
Logan Diggs, we already talked about it, out.
yeah.
Matt Jones, running back that Grayson brought up the other day, doubtful. Trey
Ooh.
Harris, doubtful. Jordan Watkins, doubtful. Jaden Williams and Caleb Warren, both on the offensive line, doubtful. Jared
Man,
Ivey, defensive end, questionable. Yam Banks, safety, questionable. Caden Lee, team second leading receiver, questionable. Jaden Kennedy, safety, questionable. JJ Bakese, Reese McIntyre, Jeremy, James, all questionable. Two of those offensive linemen, one, JJ Bakese, obviously the ultimate utility man in college football. And then we're going to get into the probables, which is pretty much every other name you know on this team.
Oh my gosh.
Princely Uman Mielen, Walter Nolan, Suntaran Perkins, TJ Daughtery, Daquan Wright, Cedric Beavers, Andy Jaffe, Rashad Amos, Micah Pettis, Nate Kalepo,
He's
Caden
still
Priestley.
going.
All those guys are probable.
That sounded between all of those like a 2 deep on both sides of the ball.
Yeah. No, it's outside of Jackson Dart and Ulysses Bentley the fourth. Every name that you recognize on that Ole Miss team is on the availability report as some sort of injury.
So, and let me be clear, I do not celebrate injuries even when they happen on my opposing team. That's terrible.
No.
I would like to amend my previous prediction and say Dawgs by 50 after hearing that. But I do not say that happily. I hate it for these guys that so many of them are probably going to miss their biggest home game of the regular season. But, you know, I hate it. As happy as I am to not have those weapons on the field, it's, you know, it's tough for them. But yeah, so hearing that though, it does make me a lot more confident in winning this game.
Conspiracy question. And
okay.
Honestly, if I'm crazy, please tell me. Right? We all know Lane Kiffin's one that popularized faking injuries for a timeout.
Yeah.
What are the odds that he listed these guys on the report so that
just so he has cover?
Just so he has cover.
Knowing him and the
50-50.
clown bullshit he has pulled throughout his entire career would not shock me.
Yeah, like
I'm not saying he's doing it. I'm just saying it wouldn't shock me.
Like 50-50 shot, something like that.
Yeah, probably. I'll be charitable, 60-40, 40 being he actually did it, but it's very, very possible.
And don't get me wrong, a lot of those guys have been injured throughout the season, so I'm not even saying like guys like JJ Pegues, Micah Pettis, guys that have been dealing with a lot of injuries. I'm not saying those guys, but guys that were allegedly healthy like 2 days ago.
Yeah. Come on. Now.
Come on. All right.
He scraped his knee lightly in practice, so he's doubtful now. Come on.
Yeah. All right, Mike's pick. He says Dawgs win and cover. He's been freebasing hopium all week, and he thinks Carson plays his best game of the season, and his receivers help him by actually catching the balls that they're supposed to catch.
Pause. Hope so, man. Because that's been another problem. Has been the drops. It's been overlooked because of the interceptions, but that's still a thing. But I hope he's right. I hope we get it together.
I agree. All right, you ready to get into some best bets?
Yeah, let's see what we need to fade this week. So I did go 1-3 last week to give you all updates. I don't remember which one won for me. It was not either of the Georgia ones. I almost made a Georgia bet this week. Thought better of it. It's not.
Yeah. See, you learned the same lesson I did.
Yeah, because even when I try to reverse jinx it, it just never goes the way I want it to. So I'm just not touching it. And you're right. So my first one, Miami is playing Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech is playing at home. They're only catching 10.5. Georgia Tech has not been able to stop teams from scoring all year, which is why I have Miami minus 10.5 in this one. I don't feel great about it. Mario Cristobal has a history against Georgia Tech of screwing games up, but just looking at what's in front of me, I feel like Miami's gonna just throw the ball all over Tech, and I hope they do because that'll give me a good indication of what happens on Black Friday.
Side note about this game: Haynes King is still has no status update for if he's going to be playing quarterback for Georgia Tech.
Okay, well that makes me feel even better about that bet then. 10.5 with that knowledge is interesting. There's one thing I have learned from you this year, John. Bet Army
Go Army,
every
beat
time.
Navy.
Yep. So Army minus 5.5 against North Texas. I get North Texas has been pretty good this year. They ain't Army good. So Army minus 5.5. Almost took a team total for Army, but this one's easier. Let's be honest. So there are two things that I know. One is that Florida State is not good.
Fair, accurate.
And the other one is that Notre Dame has played their worst this year when playing teams that are not good.
Also fair.
So I feel like Florida State plus 25.5 makes a lot of sense here. Notre Dame is better than Florida State because everyone else in college football is better than Florida State, but Notre Dame is not 26 points better than Florida State, in my opinion. So I think it's low scoring. Under is not a bad look in this game either. But I actually took a different under. We got the Battle of Utah, or whatever the rivalry is officially called, coming up this weekend, which is very exciting because it's going to be. It would have been an interesting game if Cam Rising was still around. God rest his soul. He's not dead. He just isn't going to play college football at any time ever.
Technically, he could get a medical red shirt and come back.
That's
Undertaker,
true.
throw the casket open. I ain't going nowhere.
I feel like at this point he has become like a real life Scott Sterling from those videos. If you haven't seen them, every sport Scott Sterling plays, he constantly finds ways to get hit in the face and still win. I feel like that's Cam Rising. He's just always, as soon as he steps on the field, getting himself hurt. I feel bad for the guy. Again, it's rotten luck, but it is what it is. But anyway, let me get to the actual bet here. BYU versus Utah. I like the under in this game because Utah is not going to score a whole lot of points. It's a low total. It's 40.5. But 31-7 still gets me 40.5 under. So I really like the under a lot. There's a chance that it goes over, but I feel like at 70-30, I'll sprinkle a little bit on it. Why not?
Yeah, I like that. So I've got Tennessee at Mississippi State. I'm saying over 62.
That's a high total, but I like it.
It is a high total, but Mississippi State has absolutely no secondary. So if Tennessee is going to think they've figured out their passing game going into the Georgia game next weekend, they're going to try and get that figured out this week. They're going to be going for a lot of fourth downs, trying to figure out the offense because they have not scored a point in the first quarter of a football game in over a month.
So get right game coming up.
I think this is a desperation game for Tennessee to try and figure some shit out coming to Sanford next week. Next one, I got.
Do you also think that former President Michael Van Buren contributes to this total a good bit?
I do. I think he's a good quarterback. He just needs some more talent around him. Next one, I've got Virginia at Pitt over 57.5.
I like that.
Both of these teams have put up a ton of points. Both of these teams have given up a ton of points.
Makes sense. Simple math.
Yeah. And then I am taking, aside of the BYU Utah game, but I am taking BYU -3. That's such a low spread for BYU to be as good as they are and Utah to still be questioning their quarterback position.
I almost took this one too. I probably will actually take this one.
And then I still won from you, Army -5.5. And I have a legitimate stat to back that one up. Army is allowing the 5th least yards per game in college football.
Nice. Normally, stealing a bet from me would be very dangerous, but bet Army because it always works.
But you kind of stole that from me because that's been my thing this season. So I'm just stealing it back.
Fair enough.
Oh, All right, guys, that's going to do it for this episode of the Nothing Finer podcast. Like we were talking about at the top, come hang out with us at Barrel House. If you want to get in the ticket giveaway, go to our Instagram at nothing.finer.pod to find it there. While you're following us on social media, go to Twitter at FinerPod, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok. Just look us up. You will find us there. Share the show with your friends. Rate and review 5 stars. But most importantly, as always, remember there's nothing finer in the land
Then a drunk, obnoxious Georgia fan.